golden child ruined my project, so I ruined his career. My family always played favorites with my brother. So when he deliberately sabotaged a project that could have made my entire career, my parents just told me to get over it. They really expected me to just roll over and accept it. What they didn't expect was that I'd spend the next 6 months plotting a meticulous revenge that wouldn't just get him fired. It would make sure he never worked in his industry again. This is the story of how I ruined his career. Before we get into it, if you love stories about justice being served, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And I'd love to know where you're all watching from, so drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. From the day my brother Liam was born, it felt like the scales of justice in our house tipped, got wedged, and started to rust in place. It wasn't some subtle thing I imagined in my head. It was a daily, tangible reality. He was the golden child, the sun around which our family planet revolved. And I was the other one. The responsible one. The one who was always expected to understand, to accommodate, to be the shock absorber for his whims. I'll never forget the incident with the model airplane when I was 10. I'd spent an entire month hoarding my allowance, resisting candy and comics, to buy this incredible detailed model of a P-51 Mustang. It had perfect decals, a cockpit that opened, and retractable landing gear. It was my prized possession. Liam, who was a hyperactive 7-year-old, decided he had to play with it. I told him no, gently but firmly, explaining how fragile it was. A couple of hours later, a sinking feeling led me to the backyard. There it was, smashed into a dozen pieces, the wings snapped, the canopy cracked. It looked like it had been deliberately stomped on. When I ran crying to our parents, holding the shattered remains of my treasure, the verdict was instant and absolute. "He's just a little boy, he didn't know any better," my mom said, not even looking at the broken plastic in my hands. Then she turned her gaze on me, her expression hardening. "You should have shared. This is what happens when you're selfish." I was grounded for a week for causing a scene and upsetting Liam. That evening, through my bedroom window, I saw my dad take Liam out for ice cream. This dynamic became the blueprint for our entire childhood. It wasn't just about toys, it was about worth. In high school, I'd pull all-nighters to get straight A's, and my report card would be met with a nod and an, "Oh, that's nice, honey." The one semester Liam managed to scrape by with a C average, my parents threw a celebratory dinner for his amazing turnaround. He was celebrated for meeting the bare minimum, while my achievements were treated as mere expectations. The disparity just got more galling as we got older. For his 16th birthday, a brand new cherry red convertible appeared in the driveway, complete with a giant bow. The whole neighborhood heard the roar of its engine and my brother's triumphant shouts. For my 16th, 6 months later, I was handed a bus pass and a stern lecture about the importance of earning my own way in the world. When Liam decided he wanted to live downtown, they didn't hesitate to co-sign a loan for his slick, overpriced condo with a view. But when I, a struggling university student, found a tiny basement apartment near campus and just needed help with the security deposit, I was told it was time to build my own credit, and that financial independence is a vital life lesson. All this favoritism wasn't just unfair, it was corrosive. It dug a huge, unbridgeable canyon of resentment between us. Liam grew up wrapped in a bulletproof vest of entitlement, with an unshakable belief that the world owed him everything and that consequences were a concept for other, lesser people. I learned a different lesson the hard way. I learned to be utterly and completely self-reliant. I knew with bone-deep certainty that if I wanted something in life, I would have to build it myself from the ground up, with my own 2 hands, with zero help from anyone. And that's exactly what I did. I poured every ounce of my frustration, my hurt, and my ambition into my one true passion: architecture. After years of brutal university critiques, all-nighters fueled by stale coffee, and paying my dues as a junior drafter, I was finally starting to get noticed. I was working at a small but respected firm, but my dreams were anything but small. My big break, the opportunity one had been working towards my entire life, came in the form of a major international design competition. The challenge: to design a new, sustainable multi-use arts center for the city. Winning wasn't just about the prize money, it was a career-making, life-altering event. Your name would be attached to a landmark. Your design would actually be built. It was the kind of break that catapults you from a nobody to a star overnight. For 3 intense months, that project consumed me. It was my entire world. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My diet consisted of coffee and whatever I could grab with one hand while the other was glued to a mouse or a sketch pen. But I was creating something I was truly proud of. The design was innovative, a blend of biophilic principles and sharp, modern lines that felt deeply connected to the community's spirit. The final submission had 2 critical components: A full set of photorealistic digital renderings and a painstakingly detailed handcrafted physical model that was a work of art in itself. The week before the submission deadline, my world was a whirlwind of precision and stress. And that's when my parents called. They were coming to the city for a few days with Liam, staying at his condo of course, but they insisted on coming to my place to see my work. A knot of dread formed in my stomach, but how could I say no? It would just be another thing they could hold against me. Liam swaggered into my workspace, which had consumed my entire living room, holding a large glass of red wine, sloshing it precariously. He cast a disdainful glance at the model, this intricate thing I had poured hundreds of hours and all of my soul into. Still playing with blocks, I see, he sneered, a familiar condescending smirk on his face that I ignored the jibe, my focus entirely on making a tiny adjustment to a little laser-cut tree that was a fraction of a millimeter out of place. Please be careful, Liam. Seriously. This is months of my life right here. He laughed, a loud, obnoxious bark. Relax. It's just a toy. And then it happened. It wasn't a real stumble. It was a clumsy, theatrical, over-the-top lurch, a motion no sober person would ever make. The red wine flew through the air in a perfect, horrifying arc, dumping directly over the center of my model. The dark red liquid soaked instantly into the basswood and foam core, warping the delicate pieces I'd spent weeks assembling. The cityscape bled. Then, as if in slow motion, his leg kicked out, catching the power strip my main computer and backup drives were plugged into. There was a sick little crackle, a flash of blue light, and a puff of acrid smoke from the back of the tower. My screen went black. Everything went black. My files, my renderings, my schedules, my entire digital submission. Gone. He just stood there ankle-deep in the wreckage of my career and gave me that smug, punchable smirk. Oops, he said, the word dripping with mock sincerity. There was zero remorse in his eyes. Just a triumphant flicker of smug satisfaction. Panic, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, washed over me. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Then adrenaline took over. I spent the next 24 hours in a frantic, desperate haze. I carefully unplugged the fried hard drive and took it to 3 different data recovery specialists across the city. Each one took a look, ran their diagnostics and gave me the same grim news. The power surge from the cheap strip had caused a catastrophic short. The drive's platters were physically damaged. It was gone for good. The physical model was an unsalvageable, warped, stained mess. The deadline was in 48 hours. It was over. All of it. When I finally confronted my parents, my voice was shaking with a cocktail of raw anger and profound grief. I found them having brunch with Liam at a trendy cafe. I laid it all out, the accident, the smirk, the destroyed computer, the unrecoverable files. Their reaction was exactly what a lifetime of experience should have led me to expect. He said it was an accident, my father said, refusing to make eye contact, focusing instead on meticulously applying jam to his scone. Liam feels just terrible about it, my mother added, her tone suggesting I was the one being unreasonable. You're just making him feel worse by being so dramatic. It's just a contest. You'll get another chance. Then my dad chimed in, finally looking at me with cold disappointment. Honestly, why was your expensive computer on a cheap power strip anyway? That's just poor planning. And you know how clumsy your brother is. You shouldn't have left the model out where someone could trip. You need to take some responsibility. And just like that, the blame was neatly transferred from the perpetrator to the victim. It was my fault for not protecting my work from my own brother. My fault for using the wrong extension cord. My fault for having my dreams out in the open. My pain was an inconvenience. My loss was my own doing. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Or maybe it wasn't a snap, but the forging of something new in the fire of their indifference. The flickering hope that my parents would finally one day see me and value my life. It just evaporated. I saw with chilling clarity that my life's work would always mean less than Liam's momentary comfort. I wasn't going to get justice from them. So I would have to get it for myself. I walked out of the cafe without another word, went back to my ruined apartment, shut the door, and for the first time I didn't cry. I started to think. Liam's career was his entire identity. He was a wealth manager at a boutique firm, handling the accounts for rich, powerful clients. He loved the status, the expensive suits, the whole master of the universe performance he put on. But he was arrogant, and arrogant people get sloppy. I knew his entire professional world was built on a single fragile commodity: trust. And I was going to tear it all down brick by brick. For the next 6 months, I channeled all the focus and meticulous energy I had once reserved for architecture into a new project. Him. I started piecing together everything he'd ever bragged about over the years. Client names dropped to impress our parents, deals he boasted about, his creative strategies. I spent nights on the internet cross-referencing names, learning the entire corporate structure of his firm, from his direct bosses all the way to the head of the compliance department. I learned their language. I learned their rules. The breakthrough, the key that would unlock everything, came at a mandatory family dinner a few months later. Liam, completely oblivious and emboldened by his victory, started complaining about a difficult, elderly client. He laughed as he described how he'd moved her conservative, fixed-income portfolio into a series of high-risk, high-commission private equity funds she couldn't possibly understand. He bragged that the fees alone would pay for his upcoming vacation to Bali. "She just signs where I tell her to sign," he said with a wink to my dad, who chuckled approvingly. He wasn't just unethical, he was cruel. And in his arrogance, he just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. In the heavily regulated world of finance, getting fired for ethical violations, a termination for cause, is a career death sentence. It triggers mandatory reports to regulatory bodies like FINRA and puts a permanent, public black mark on your record that all future employers are legally required to check. I wasn't just going to get him fired. I was going to make him professionally untouchable. The first step was to build my weapon. I created a fake online persona, Alex Miller, a disgruntled junior analyst who had recently quit the firm out of moral disgust. The name was intentionally generic. I set up a secure, anonymous email account through a provider that prided itself on privacy. My strategy was crucial. I wasn't going to hand them a complete case against him on a silver platter. That would look like a personal vendetta. Instead, my goal was to plant a seed of doubt so poisonous that they would have no choice but to launch their own internal investigation. I spent a week drafting a cold, professional email, meticulously filling it with the industry jargon I had learned. I wrote as Alex, expressing my profound discomfort with the aggressive, unsuitable strategies being pushed on vulnerable clients by a senior manager, Mr. Liam, last name. I specifically referenced the elderly client he'd bragged about, noting my concern that her portfolio was grossly misaligned with her stated risk profile and investment objectives. I didn't make wild accusations. I just raised concerns about potential violations of fiduciary duty and regulation best interest. To make it utterly believable, I faked a simple trade summary for the client's account, showing a pattern of churning, excessive trading designed purely to generate commissions. It was a document a junior analyst would believably have access to. I was careful. I didn't send all the proof I suspected existed. I just sent enough to tell them exactly where to start digging. The real, damning evidence was already in his files on his computer in the company's records. I was just giving them the map and the shovel. On a Friday at exactly 4:55 p.m. I hit send. The email went to 3 people simultaneously: Liam's direct supervisor, the firm's head of compliance, and the CEO. I wanted their weekends to be filled with dread. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the anxiety that had been my constant companion since Liam destroyed my future. For 10 agonizing days, there was nothing but silence. I was a wreck, constantly checking for any news, any sign that the fuse had been lit. I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake, if they'd just dismissed it as a crank email. Then the storm hit. My mother called me, her voice a high-pitched shriek of panic and fury. "What did you do?" she screamed into the phone. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice a carefully constructed mask of calm. "Liam, your brother. He's been suspended. They're investigating him. They took his laptop, his work phone. He's a mess. He says you did this, that you're trying to ruin his life." I let the silence hang in the air for a beat, savoring it. "My life?" I replied, my voice turning cold. "You mean the one you all told me to get over? I'm a little busy trying to rebuild my career from absolute zero, Mom. I don't really have time to think about Liam." I hung up the phone. The internal investigation was as swift and brutal as I had dared to hope. My one anonymous email was the single thread they pulled that unraveled his entire tapestry of deceit. They started with the elderly client and found exactly what I said they would. That led them to look at his other accounts. They discovered a clear pattern of him recommending products based on the commission he'd get, not what the client needed. They found he was churning accounts to boost his numbers. Even worse, they found evidence he was faking performance reports and forging client signatures on documents to cover his tracks. He wasn't just a bad employee, he was a massive, ticking legal and financial liability for the firm. 3 weeks after that first phone call from my mother, he was officially terminated for cause. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for him. The for-cause termination was filed on his public U-5 form, a permanent record in the financial industry. His licenses were put under immediate review by regulatory authorities. In the small, gossipy world of high finance, the news spread like wildfire. He was radioactive. No reputable firm would ever touch a manager with that kind of black mark on his record. His entire career, A flimsy structure built on nothing but charm, nepotism, and cutting corners, was over. Our family, already fractured, shattered completely. My parents, even when faced with undeniable third-party proof of what their golden child had done, still couldn't bring themselves to blame him. In their warped narrative, I was the villain for exposing him, not him for committing the acts. Our relationship, which was already hanging by the thinnest of threads, just crumbled into dust. I stopped answering their calls and eventually I went almost entirely no contact. And honestly, a strange and profound sense of peace settled over me. The crushing weight of their constant judgment, an anchor I'd been dragging my whole life, was just gone. Losing that competition felt like the end of the world at the time, but it turned out to be a new beginning. Free from the corporate world and the pressure to achieve a certain kind of success, I took a leap of faith. I used the little savings I had and started my own independent design studio. I focused on small-scale, sustainable projects, community gardens, laneway housing, nonprofit renovations, the kind of work I actually cared about, work with integrity. The first couple of years were incredibly tough, a grind of 80-hour weeks and constant uncertainty. But slowly, project by project, I built a reputation for being creative, reliable, and passionate. Today my firm is thriving. I'm doing work that I love, completely on my own terms. I recently won a regional design award for a sensory community garden I designed for children with disabilities. Looking at that small, simple plaque on my wall brings me 100 times more joy than the idea of that massive corporate art center ever could have. As for Liam, I hear through the grapevine he's selling used cars at a dealership in a different state. My parents still send him money to help with his rent. Some things, it seems, never change. I don't feel a shred of guilt. He lit the match. I just calmly stepped out of the way of the fire he started. He destroyed something I built with passion and hard work, and in doing so he showed the world that his own success was built on nothing but lies. In the end, he didn't just ruin my project. He exposed himself for who he really was. I just held the door open while karma walked in. And that's the story. It was a long road, but I finally got the justice my family was never going to give me. What do you all think? Was I wrong, or was this just karma evening the score? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you have a story about a golden child finally getting what they deserve, I definitely want to read it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. And tell us where you are watching from.